And joining us on this edition of the News Review, we have publisher of Africa Briefing, Jonathan Ofayanso, is joining us from London, and also activist and commentator Don DeBar, joining us from Austin, New York. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Let's start off with Mr. Ofayanso in London. First of all, give us your perspective on how the situation has panned out in Niger, and also, if you may, walk us through the recent comments by the Kremlin and whether you agree in terms of what Russia has mentioned about any powers like non-regional countries like the U.S. Interference will not help improve the situation.
Yes, this is an African problem that I believe, or the ECOWAS believes, should be solved by Africa, in this case, by West Africans. So that is why, and the ECOWAS, has a policy of maintaining democracy in the sub-region. Okay, that is why, in all the previous coup d'etats since 2020, 2021, each country that staged a coup d'etat, that experienced a coup d'etat, was placed under sanctions, right? And negotiations were held, and roadmaps, have been designed, to take them back to civilian rule. So the latest situation with Niger is just a continuation or a maintenance of that policy of deterring or discouraging military coups in the subcontinent.
Don DeBar, Niger's president, the ousted president rather, Mohamed Bazoum, has called for the U.S. and with it the entire international community to intervene in the African country. Russia says that such an intervention will actually not help improve the situation. Break that down for us, please.
Okay. The idea, let's have the U.S. Reinstall all of the people driven from office under a constitutional order. We could do Laurent Gbagbo in Cote d'Ivoire, which that's pretty close to Niger. We could go to Mel Zelaya in Honduras. We could go to Dilma Rousseff in Brazil. We could go, of course, into Ukraine to Viktor Yanukovych. Around the world, there are so many places that the U.S. has decided this constitutional order is not worth recognizing. And if you look at the way they treat constitutionally elected officials, aside from the ones I just named, for example, in Venezuela and Nicaragua and Cuba, where you have constitutions that are actually drafted by the people in some very open and democratic processes, those elected officials, that constitutional order is to be negated by any means necessary. And this one, which is the child of about 400 years of colonialism, including 150 or whatever years of direct French colonialism in North and West Africa, that is something to be respected. And what's telling about that is this: the order that supports is to be respected at all costs, because the Western political economy rests on the deep exploitation of Africa in particular, and also in Latin America and Asia.
So we're talking about a U.S. intervention. What about an African intervention there? We've already know that West African nations, they're about to determine whether there should be any potential intervention regarding Niger's coup. How will that situation end up, in your opinion?
Mine?
Yeah, it's for you.
Yeah. First of all, there's an awakening going on across Africa that's been a long time in the making. There have been a lot of setbacks, heavy concentration of recolonization, and really never an opportunity to pry the economic resources of the continent from colonial hands. But I don't know that any of these governments that many of them have been placed in power already by the West over the last 10 and 15, 20 years, if they would stand more than an hour after they took a move against Niger in this particular case, and against Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and the others that are coming online, I think that those people in charge of those governments, if they want to stay in power, need to keep their own noses out of it, because if all the way here in the United States we can see that they're puppets of the U.S. and Europe, certainly their own people who've endured centuries of that nonsense can see it very clearly, and it seems like they're now poised to act.
And Mr. Ofansa, same question to you. What are the chances of having Western African countries actually intervening here for the situation in Niger? And what are the ripple effects that this coup in Niger could be sending for that specific region in Africa?
Well, the threat, to militarily intervene, to me, it will be an act of the very, very last resort. That is why they sent a delegation to negotiate with the junta. In fact, the delegation left Niger, Niamey, the Nigerian capital, today without having an audience with the head of the junta. But that does not bring an end, to efforts, to restore the country to civilian rule. But I believe that the military, but should the military intervention be carried out, it will spell, chaos, doom, and chaos for the region, because that will invite other external forces to get involved. And when I say external forces, I'm not discounting maybe the involvement of Russia through its proxy, the Wagner mercenary group, right? And America, USA, also it still has its troops stationed in Niger. USA sees Niger as its last most reliable bastion of its last most reliable place, to fight, jihadist insurgencies within the region. So the U.S. has not pulled out troops. So should this happen, the U.S. might also intervene, and we're not also discounting the French influence. French being the former colonial power, the French might also intervene. So should that military option, right, be exercised, it will spell chaos, for the sub-region.
All right, thanks a lot, gentlemen. Jonathan Ofansa joining us from London, and Don DeBar joining us from Ossining, in New York. With that, it brings us to an end here on this edition of the News Review, but stick around. There's plenty more to come here on Press TV.